Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Chat EbT. I'm your host, Mohammed Ebrahim Tayob. Now, as you know, one of our favorite topics to discuss right here on the show is people that have pivoted in their careers. And my next guest did just that. She's a chartered accountant who did a powerful pivot from the corporate world in setting up her own personal development coaching brand and mentoring young professionals to unlock their full potential. Please help me in welcoming Usha Maharaj. Usha, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Such a pleasure to be on Chat EbT. I've been waiting for this moment, so thanks for the invitation.
No, it's my pleasure. I likewise. I know we've been trying to set it up for a little bit of a while. Obviously, logistics is always fun. But no, thank you so much for being here. I am really looking forward to this chat.
Me as well. I'm really looking forward to it, and really looking forward to talking about not just the pivot, but also maybe touching on some of your audience that are thinking about their own personal pivots and how we can actually maybe delve into supporting and giving some tips and advice that might support them.
That'll be great. We speak a lot about this pivot. Now, you, obviously, I mentioned a chartered accountant. You built your career up in a Big Four audit firm up to the point where you were a director at one stage, and then sort of decided that's it and walked away from that. Now, I'm very keen to understand that a little bit more. So was there a particular idea that just sparked in your mind that just said, okay, I think I want to go and do professional coaching? Or was it more in the sense of, I just feel very stuck here and I need something new?
So for me, it really was, I was approaching my 40s.
Yeah.
And I don't know, so when I was young, much younger, in school and through university, I always had this desire, this wish that when I would retire at the age of 40. I always held on to this thing that I would retire at the age of 40. But when I got into my career, it was such a high-powered, fantastic career. I mean, working in a Big Four firm, the experience that you get, the challenges you're experiencing, the growth that it's so powerful. I had forgotten about this desire at the back of my mind that I would retire at the age of 40. But I attended a seminar by Robin Sharma. And he was on stage and he was talking about, purpose and what is your true purpose and how do you connect to your true purpose. And that was a couple of years before I turned 40. And it really, it connected with me and it made me think deeply about what my purpose is. Because at that point, like many of us in our 30s, we're building family. We're building, the support structure. We're building our financial, dependencies. So we're building all of these things, and that's what the 30s are about. They're about running in that direction, running really fast, building all of this support around you. But when I started to think about my purpose, I started to think about what is that circle of impact and influence look like. And right now in my 30s, the circle of impact and influence was my family. So really, that's my first point of call is what do I do to serve the family. But beyond the family, it was everyone in the community at work, and it was the clients, but it wasn't stretching further than that. And I started to feel this really deep need, this desire to connect and to make my purpose feel a lot bigger, for that impact and influence to be a lot bigger. And by the time I reached the decision to leave was entirely around what is this, how am I going to fulfill this need, this deep calling to impact and influence a much wider audience. And that coincidentally happened in the year I was turning 40, and I made the decision to walk away, a very difficult decision, by the way.
I can imagine.
From a very prestigious position in a very prestigious firm, earning a salary every month, to completely the unknown. And just that faith and belief that it's going to lead me to what I needed to do.
And at that time, was it the professional coaching, was that your idea at that time, or was it something that had just built up over the years once you left?
Yes.
What was the thought process when you were leaving?
When I first left, I thought I would do consulting. And I had started off doing consulting in the people space, talent development, because it's still people, it's impact, it's creating that sort of impact. And coincidentally, I had hired myself coaches. So I worked with really powerful, prominent coaches in that first year that I left corporate. And they kept saying, Usha, you have got this career path behind you. You've got this ability to influence and impact and inspire. Why aren't you focusing on working with women? Women need you. Women empowerment is such a strong need in the environment. And I literally had my blinkers on, because through my corporate career, whenever I needed help and support, that help and support arrived. Whenever I needed someone to open a door, and I think it's because of the way I ran my career and the relationships I built, the doors were opened for me. And I could not understand, I couldn't fathom, what is this need for women empowerment? I was very anti Women's Day, because it felt to me like you're looking down on women, and it's women need all of this help. Actually, we don't. We're pretty dynamic, we're pretty strong, we can make this happen, you know? And I kept being pushed in this direction of working with women and coaching women and empowering women, but I kept pushing against it, because my belief system goes against that. But I had a conversation with an executive at SAICA that said, in the firms, we're really struggling because women are reaching a certain point in their careers and they are leaving. They're not staying, they're not getting into the director's seat, and we're not able to shift the stats. The stats are not shifting. What can you do to support? And that was literally 4 years after I had left the firm, and I was doing my consulting and my coaching, but being asked this question made me pause and reflect on my own journey. And I got deep into the research of why is it that women were struggling? Why is it they reach a certain point and they're leaving? Why is it that I could get to that point? You know, how did I do it differently, and how can I help other women do it differently, but still in a way that is very much related to who they are and how aligned to themselves. And I developed a coaching program for women, which I've been running every year alongside SAICA since 2018.
Brilliant.
And we have had the most phenomenal, profound results through it. But it all comes down to understanding who we are, understanding the difference we want to make, what drives us, and how do we make that unique impact in this world aligned to our own authenticity. And when we do that, irrespective of where you're sitting, you are sitting making a decision now, irrespective of who you are, what that decision point looks like, you can use the blueprint and you can make that decision. And it feels so much more authentic to you.
No, that's quite amazing, and I especially love the way you mentioned in the sense of women empowerment, and that although that was not at your forefront, it was something that once you then looked into, it sort of just became a whole new avenue for you. You know, we had a guest here previously, and one of the things we discussed is, as we mentioned, pivoting in careers, right? One thing he brought to the forefront is also being able to pivot to your original plans.
And I always like to say, why is it that some of us are able to pivot so much easier than others? Why is it that some of us can let go of that plan that we had for ourselves and say, wait a second, there's a door of opportunity opening there. I'm actually going to walk through it. Let me dip my toes in that water and see where it leads. And I get really interested in that. And one of the things that we've got to understand is, as human beings, we're born with this little blueprint. And often it's termed your personality types, right? And some of us really have a strong need to be grounded in certainty, to really understand, to have this clear path. This is where I'm going, this is what I want to do with my life, and this is how I'm going to do it with my life. And anytime we get driven or pushed in a different direction that's taking us off the certain path that we're on, it makes us extremely uncomfortable, and we push back. And instead of saying, let me open myself up to this uncertainty, let me give into that fear and the discomfort I'm going to feel, and let me learn what I need to learn in order to pivot, we get really stubborn. We get really much, we fight against it, and we say, no, this is what I signed up for, I'm not going to do it. And it really holds us back from the opportunities that might be waiting for us.
So, I mean, in your expertise, how do we fight against that urge to say, nope, this is who I am, this is how I need to go about things?
So when we're fighting and we're saying, this is who I am, this is how I need to go about things, it's almost like, we're navigating through this dense forest. And initially, we had a map, and the map said you needed to stay on this path. So it's almost like you chose your hiking trail, and you needed to stay on this path or you're going to get lost, right? And now we get to a point, and we can hear this waterfall, and it sounds so beautiful, but it's off the path. And we're needing to now divert. If we had the opportunity to almost say, is there a way for me to just get myself up above this dense forest so I can see what are the routes I could possibly take to get to that waterfall, then we'll feel a lot more comfortable. So it's almost saying, can you just withdraw from the detail and the drama, withdraw from that path that you're on right now, and try to have a bigger picture, view of what's happening in your life. Look at the entire life. Look at the map. Look at what could happen if you went down that path and you actually had your picnic at that waterfall, instead of, keep chugging along and wondering what's going to be beautiful at the end of this track. If we're able to extract ourselves from that detail and the drama that we're in that moment, have the bigger picture view, the helicopter view of what's happening, we're able to make decisions a lot more clearer.
Fully agree with that. And I also think it comes down to that sort of fear as well of, number one, yes, I fully agree, going with the flow. But I think also a lot of people have that aspect is, oh, I've invested so much in this, I can't just turn my back on it. I'm a CA. I've studied for so many years. I went through my articles. I went through all this difficulty. I don't want to do this anymore, but it took me 8 years to get here. How can I give that up? And I think that's where a lot of the challenge is as well.
That's absolutely true. So we invest so much in getting us to a certain point, Like me, for example, I went down the CA route and invested so much in my career, but it doesn't mean that when we pivot, we lose all of that. I utilize absolutely everything I've learned, all of my experiences. I work largely with chartered accountants and chartered accountant women right now. If I didn't have that background and experience, I would not be able to do that. I would never be able to serve my market in the way I'm able to serve them now.
That's actually a very good point. I really like that. And in all honesty, personally, I struggle a little bit with that. And I'm keen to hear your insights here, is that sometimes, I fully agree with you, there's skills that we have learned throughout our careers that are, exceptional, and we can use them. But a lot of times when you're sitting at this position of changing things up, you struggle to kind of see what you've learned. And I think there's that, you know what, I'm been an accountant for so long. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I've just wasted 10 years. And people will say, but obviously you are a chartered accountant, you've worked in industry for so long, surely you're going to take something away from that. A lot of people can't see that, what they're going to take away from that. And I think that's where a lot of the challenges come, is I think those skills are there, make no mistake, but I think a lot of people can't fully appreciate all those skills. And at that time, it just seems like I'm taking away nothing.
Yeah.
What would be your approach to coaching someone that's feeling like that?
Yeah. So I've coached so many individuals that are feeling that way, right? And the first thing that I notice is that you probably aren't recognizing the full value that you bring into this world. And one of the first things I'll ask you to do is to take a notebook and a pen and to sit down and start to jot down all of the wins that you've had in your life, all of the successes, all of the times you've done something differently, all of the times where you pushed against a barrier and then you came out on the other side and you were so proud of yourself. So think about everything you've done on this journey, the challenges, the wins, the successes. How have you created impact? How have you profoundly added value? What were you most proud of yourself for doing? We often neglect to look at ourselves and look at ourselves really as that person that's creating all of this value along the way. And when we're assessing, now we're making the decision, we make it almost at surface level. And at surface level, this is who I am, this is the value I can bring. I can audit, I can prep financial statements. That's the value. That's not the value that you bring. You're forgetting who you are at the core. What are your strengths? Are you able to take data and organize it in a superior fashion? Are you able to walk into a brand new client and develop those relationships immediately, and that relationship's going to unlock new opportunities at that client? What is the spark that you're able to bring in, that thing that makes you uniquely you? And how do you do it differently to somebody else? You marry that to the technical skills, experience, and expertise, and then you come out with the value that you're able to have. But most of us neglect to do that part where we go and we really do the audit on what is the value that I've created in my life, who am I really, what should I be proud of, because those are the things that are going to add value in the future.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I can see where you're going with that. I think it is something that we struggle to find within, but I like the concept you mentioned of just actually writing it down. We don't actually realize half the things. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, and it's the way that most people are wired, is we only think of a lot of the negative stuff as opposed to thinking of those wins, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And when we only think about the negative stuff, then we train this little voice in our heads, the little critic in our minds that will always point out the negative stuff, the problem, the thing that you didn't do correctly. Oh, you spoke up in that meeting, but you could have said it better if you had said it like that person. But when you spoke up, did you see how everyone was looking at you? You know, so it's because we constantly remembering all of the faults, all of the mistakes that we make, all of the things that we do wrong, and then we train this brain to remind us of that. It's the red BMW. Again, it's going to point it out constantly because it thinks we want to hear this. But if we go through those exercises where we start to train our brain to notice all of the things we do well, all of the areas we're outstanding in, all of the things that bring us joy, then our brains are going to start pointing more and more of that out, and it'll make us more confident to be able to do the things that initially would have made us feel uncertain. So it builds courage from the inside out. So we've got to be practicing that on a daily basis.
You know, as you're saying that, so one of the things I absolutely love is quotes. I love looking at great quotes. And I actually saw one of yours that I absolutely loved. And while you're saying that actually reminded me of it, your quote was, "Never accept the unacceptable." Now, I really love that, but it actually made me think of that, is that sometimes we just need to make sure that we're not accepting that unacceptable.
Thanks for that. And what we also need to remind ourselves is that we have to be saying that that's unacceptable. You know, it's unacceptable for me to walk out of the meeting and bash myself over the head because I didn't say something, or I said something that sounded incorrect. That's unacceptable. Why should I accept me speaking to myself that way? And whenever we remind ourselves, or we're constantly flagging, wait a second, Usha, that's unacceptable. Maybe you can do it a little differently this time round. Maybe you can be a little kinder. Maybe you can notice all of the things that people have been like looking at you and saying, wow, that was incredible. Maybe you can do that a little bit more. And I think if we become a little bit more aware of what's unacceptable, but also of the things that we're saying to ourselves that are unacceptable, our lives start to transform a whole lot quicker.
No, completely agree with that. And it's also setting up these sort of boundaries. Like you mentioned, we set up external boundaries, but a lot of times we don't set up those boundaries for ourselves. You know, yes, bashing yourself, no, that's not okay. Let's look at the positive. Fully agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. It's the internal boundaries that actually build us up and are the most important boundaries. And we often, it's easier to notice the external factors. So you were talking about a pivot, you know, in your career. And a lot of the times when we get to that point where we think, I need to change directions, I need to leave this place, I need to do something else, the pivot often comes from an external factor. It's, I don't like the boss, this company is not appreciating me, they're paying somebody doing exactly the same thing as me, they're paying them higher, they don't notice me, they don't give me the opportunities. So we'll get to this point and we'll say, I think it's time for me to move on. But we are making that call based on external factors. We haven't paused to think, wait a second, how am I directing this from the inside? What have I done differently? Where could I pivot on the inside in terms of my thinking, in terms of my growth, in terms of how I'm approaching the difficulties and the challenges that are being placed in front of me? Where can I like really challenge those internal narratives and the internal boundaries that will make me approach this pivot point differently? Because when we approach that point based on the external factors that many people are doing, we are actually running away from something. We haven't transformed the internal narrative. You're going to experience that same thing in a different company, just labeled a little differently. So don't do that. Really figure out what is driving you to feel this way now. What are the internal contributors that you have control over changing? Change them, then make your decision and run towards something. So be very clear that you're not running away, but you're actually running toward something that you are designing, something by design that you desire. Very different outcomes if you approach it in that way.
The problem then that creates is that you have a whole lot of people that are driven more by the fear of failure rather than succeeding. And I think we then go about, and again, I'm one of those people, that everything we do is more in the sense of, okay, I just got to make sure I don't do this wrong, as opposed to, you know, if I do a really good job here, this is going to be the difference maker.
Exactly, that's exactly it. We are stuck in this loop of everything, the decisions we make are fear-based. You know, the decision to not apply for a promotion in the company is fear-based.
Yeah.
So we want to do so many things in life. We want to achieve so many things, but we just constantly lugging around this suitcase of fear that just, these shackles of fear that just will not allow us to do things differently.
In the aspect of, we're talking about fear now, and we spoke a little bit about the pivot, right? So I think there's a lot of people that are actually stuck in their careers, right? And as we mentioned, there's a whole lot of aspects to that, to the internal and external. But I think a lot of people might just feel trapped or stuck. But it's that fear of the unknown and sort of making that switch that holds people back. Or rather, on the other side of that, there's a lot of people that want to start up businesses. But I think sort of talk themselves out of doing it more on the aspect of, okay, well, there's already 100 businesses like this. Mine's probably not going to be different. So is there a point of doing this? Let's not do it. And all of that just stays on the drawing board due to that fear. So in that aspect, if you're sitting with somebody that wants to, let's use the example of make that change in their career, and is on the verge of doing that, but just can't seem to pull that trigger, how do you help them with that? Or what's your mindset behind jumping or taking that leap?
So break it down. Whenever we're making a massive decision, there are so many factors that are affecting the massive end decision that we're making, right? Mm-hmm. So break it down. Take the big decision and say, in order for me to make this massive decision, I need to see what are the different factors I need to gain some clarity and certainty on. Our brain thrives on clarity and certainty. If we can't give ourselves that clarity and certainty, we're unable to make a decision. We just can't move. We feel paralyzed. So break it down into different segments. So it might be from a finance perspective. If I want to pivot and I want to start a business, what are the financial impacts? What do I need to understand? How can I get clarity there? What does the budget look like? What do I need? Where's funding going to come from? How am I going to be able to continue this lifestyle that I've got? So tick off that box. Then we'll go and we'll say, well, I don't understand how to access new markets. I don't know how to push from a sales perspective. How can I get clarity and certainty there? Do I need to go on a training course? Can I employ somebody to be able to do that function in the business? Can I get a mentor to help me? Can I speak to other entrepreneurs that are doing that little segment phenomenally well so I can gain clarity and certainty? So break down your decision, which is the one decision, into 10 different buckets, each of which you're needing to get clarity and certainty on. Build certainty and clarity in each of those areas. And once you've done that, the decision becomes the easy thing to make. But if we don't do that, we don't know where the overwhelm's coming from. We don't know that the only thing I need to make to be able to make that ultimate decision is to get the clarity and certainty on how I can land that first customer. Everything else is sorted. The funding is sorted. Everything else is in place. Risk management's in place. We know exactly the blueprint. We have the service lines. We have it all packaged. We know exactly what we're going to do. We don't have clarity on that one thing, but if we didn't break it down, we don't know that's the problem we need to solve. And then the entire decision suffers because of it.
What message would you like people to take away from our conversation today?
I would love for your audience to really believe that irrespective of what they're going through today, they have the power and the potential within them to be able to navigate out of it. I would love for your audience to have the belief in themselves that they can tap into that power and potential to get out of it. And if they're struggling with it, at times maybe you just need to speak to someone that can lift you out of the drama and the detail so that you can see what is available to you, to you around you, so that you can make the moves that you're needing to make.
I think this would be very interesting to hear, but we asked a few of our guests this. If you had to write an autobiography, what would the title of that autobiography be?
So I heard you ask this question to a few of your guests, and I thought, okay, this is such an interesting one for me to think about. And I'm an introverted personality.
Okay.
Completely introverted. Nobody believes it when they meet me in a professional sense, but that is who I am. And from childhood all the way into school days and then university days, I would only engage with this tiny group of people. I've never networked beyond that. In articles, it would be with my managers and whoever I was 100% comfortable with. I would not spread my wings beyond that. And it affected the way that I was able to share my ideas. And that's why I always come back to this point of speaking your voice and, speaking your mind and sharing your ideas, because I couldn't do that. I was terrified to be able to do that, and it was really because of my introverted personality. And as a manager, we'd have manager meetings, and I would always be the one taking the minutes, because I would volunteer to take the minutes. Because if you're taking minutes, your head is down, you're writing, you don't need to contribute and engage. But I would have these ideas in my mind often before somebody else shared them in the room. But I would just never say it out loud, never. And one day I was like, wait a second, I can't take this anymore. They're spending such a long time. I have the answer. And without even thinking, I just blurted out the answer. And my manager at the time, one of the best managers I've ever had in my life, he's so funny. He just shouted and he said, she speaks. And he burst out laughing and he said, that's a brilliant idea. But the way he said she speaks, I can actually just go back into that boardroom, and he laughed and he said it, and that has stuck with me my entire life. But it's also at every point that I've started to make impact and influence is very important to me. To be able to grow in impact and influence came from my ability to speak to a wider audience, my ability to speak my mind and share my thoughts and be brave enough to do that irrespective of what the outcome might be. Being here with you today, is part of speaking my voice and sharing. So she speaks. I think that would be the title.
Right, I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. And I think it works on so many different levels. So I think that's brilliant. Usha, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. As we said, I know there's been some logistics. Usha is actually from Durban and came all the way to our studios in Johannesburg. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's been such a phenomenal chat. And I always love to chat to people in your industry, because not only does it give such great insights for the guests, but I also get such great insights myself. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Thank you so much for having me, Mohammed. And thanks to your audience for listening and tuning in and engaging on the content that you're sharing. I love it when we push through our own barriers, like you said, to get yourself and get this podcast started, because you're growing in purpose. You're growing in the impact and the influence that you're creating. You're impacting an individual that's sitting out there that has a question and didn't have the answer to it. So I think that is really, truly profound. So proud of what you're doing and achieving, and love that I had the opportunity to be on your show today. Thank you.
No, absolutely our pleasure. All right, that's our show. Thank you once again for joining us right here on Chat EbT. Another phenomenal episode with yet another phenomenal guest. Some great insights we can take away from this episode. But in all honesty, my personal favorite is just taking that step back, looking at the problem with fresh eyes and a clearer perspective, and that just makes all the change in the world. Once again, my name is Ebrahim Tayob, and you're watching Chat EbT. Please join us again next time.